Welcome to Washington Today for Friday, April 8th, 2022. I'm Nkoyo Iyamba. Here are some of today's headlines. With a ceremony on the South Lawn of the White House, President Biden delivered remarks on the historic Senate confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson to be the first black woman to be seated on the Supreme Court. We'll hear more about that event in just a moment. In Kyiv, a missile hit a train station where thousands of people had gathered to flee in eastern Ukraine, killing at least 50 people. This is according to Ukrainian authorities. We'll have an update on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine coming up. A leader of the Proud Boys pleaded guilty to a conspiracy to obstruct Congress during the January 6, 2021 riot at the Capitol. Charles Donahoe, the leader of a North Carolina chapter of the group, reached a plea deal with the government that includes cooperation with prosecutors. He pleaded to 2 charges: the conspiracy to obstruct Congress's proceedings, as well as to impeding police officers. And coronavirus cases are quickly rising in New York City and Washington, D.C., amid the spread of the dominant Omicron subvariant BA2. The New York Times' coronavirus tracker for New York City shows that cases have risen over 50% in the last 2 weeks, while the newspaper's tracker for D.C. shows cases had doubled. TheHill.com reporting that cases in both cities are relatively low compared to where they were just earlier this year in January. We begin now on the South Lawn of the White House, where family, friends, and others cheered on newly confirmed Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Judge Jackson spoke about this historic moment.
To be sure, I have worked hard to get to this point in my career, and I have now achieved something far beyond anything my grandparents could have possibly ever imagined. But no one does this on their own. The path was cleared for me so that I might rise to this occasion. And in the poetic words of Dr. Maya Angelou, I do so now while bringing the gifts my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave.
Judge Jackson, at times, speaking through tears, spoke on what it means to be the first African-American woman Supreme Court Justice.
The notes that I've received from children are particularly cute and especially meaningful because more than anything, they speak directly to the hope and promise of America. It has taken 232 years and 115 prior appointments for a black woman to be selected to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. But we've made it. We've made it, all of us, all of us. And our children are telling me that they see now more than ever that here in America, anything is possible.
Judge Jackson's arrival on the bench won't upend the current 6-3 conservative balance. However, it will be the first time 4 female justices serve on the Supreme Court at the same time. Here's Judge Jackson crediting her family for helping her to get to this point.
My daughters, Talia and Layla, I bet you never thought you'd get to skip school by spending a day at the White House. This is all pretty exciting for me as well, but nothing has brought me greater joy than being your mother. I love you very much. Patrick, thank you for everything you've done for me over these past 25 years of our marriage. You've done everything to support and encourage me, and it is you who've made this moment possible. Your steadfast love gave me the courage to move in this direction. I don't know that I believed you when you said that I could do this, but now I do.
Judge Jackson will be the High Court's first former public defender. She has degrees from Harvard and Harvard Law School and held top clerkships, including for Justice Stephen Breyer, whom she calls her mentor. She promised to follow in his footsteps.
I also understand from my many years of practice as a legal advocate, as a trial judge, and as a judge on a court of appeals, that part of the genius of the constitutional framework of the United States is its design, and that the framers entrusted the judicial branch with the crucial but limited role. I've also spent the better part of the past decade hearing thousands of cases and writing hundreds of opinions, and in every instance, I have done my level best to stay in my lane and to reach a result that is consistent with my understanding of the law and with the obligation to rule independently without fear or favor. I am humbled and honored to continue in this fashion as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, working with brilliant colleagues, supporting and defending the Constitution, and steadfastly upholding the rule of law.
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will fill Justice Stephen Breyer's seat when he retires later this year. A White House official said that Judge Jackson will remain on the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, but continue to recuse herself from cases. Also speaking at the White House ceremony, Vice President Kamala Harris. She spoke on her experience presiding over the Senate's 53-47 vote to confirm Judge Jackson on Thursday.
Privilege, I will share with you, Judge Jackson, that when I presided over the Senate confirmation vote yesterday, while I was sitting there, I drafted a note to my goddaughter. And I told her that I felt such a deep sense of pride and joy, and about what this moment means for our nation and for her future. And I will tell you, her braids are just a little longer than yours. But as I wrote to her, I told her what I knew this would mean for her life and all that she has in terms of potential.
Meanwhile, President Joe Biden spoke about the 3 Republican senators who voted Thursday to confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
I mean it sincerely, but I want to thank 3 Republicans who voted for Judge Jackson. Senator Collins, who's a woman of integrity. Senator Murkowski, the same way, an Alaskan, up for re-election. And Mitt Romney, whose dad stood up like he did. His dad stood up and made these decisions on civil rights. They deserve enormous credit for setting aside partisanship and making a carefully considered judgment based on the judge's character, qualifications, independence. And I truly admire the respect, diligence, and hard work they demonstrated in the course of the process. As someone who's overseen, they tell me, more Supreme Court nominations than anyone who's alive today, I believe that respect for the process is important. And that's why it was so important to me to meet the constitutional requirement to seek the advice and the consent of the Senate.
From the South Lawn of the White House, a celebration of the confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to serve as a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. We now go to Ukraine, where a missile hit a train station Friday packed with evacuees. Ukrainian officials said that at least 50 people were killed, including several children, and about 100 were wounded. The Russian Defense Ministry denied attacking the station in Kramatorsk, a city in Ukraine's contested Donbass region. But President Volodymyr Zelensky and other Ukrainian leaders accused Russia's military of deliberately targeting a location where only civilians were assembled. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials said they expect to uncover further evidence of war crimes in parts of the country previously controlled by Russian troops. At the Pentagon, Press Secretary John Kirby gave an update on what the U.S. is doing to help with the war in Ukraine.
On Ukraine, as the Russians narrow the focus of their operations to the Donbass and the south, as you described, do you anticipate that this will change in any significant way the Ukrainians' needs, the type of needs they'll have for weaponry, other assistance from the United States and other partners? And also, will it make it significantly more difficult to get it into them?
I do not. We do not assess that this higher focus by the Russians on the south and the east by itself, geographically, is going to affect in any appreciable way the continued transshipment of security assistance on the ground into Ukraine that the United States is helping to coordinate. And as for whether it will change the requirements, I think largely that's going to be up to the Ukrainians. As I think you all know, the Secretary spoke with Minister Reznikov just yesterday, late yesterday afternoon. Good conversation, as they all are. The minister was grateful for the security assistance, particularly the recent announcement of $100 million worth of javelins, which we did very much in keeping with conversations with them about this renewed fighting in a much more confined geographic area. So we are tailoring our security assistance to meet their needs on the ground, but it's their needs we're trying to meet. We're not trying to, foist stuff upon them that we don't think that they can use. So I guess that's a long answer to a very brief question. It's too soon to know if there's going to have to be any adjustments. We'll work that out in real time with Mr. Reznikov and the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And clearly, if it's something we can do and we can do it quickly, we will absolutely do that. Right now, I don't think we're anticipating any major muscle movement changes in terms of the security assistance required for this new push by the Russians in the Donbass. I will tell you, and I think I've said this before, but I mean, one of the things the Ukrainians continue to say is one of their most valuable commodities is small arms ammunition. And we and other nations continue to provide literally millions of rounds. It doesn't get the headlines. I understand that. It's not as dramatic as anti-tank missiles or Stinger anti-air missiles, but it's a vital need that they use literally every day, and that continues to flow.
Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby. The headline at WashingtonTimes.com reads, Congress nixes normal trade relations with Russia, opens door to steep tariffs, by Capitol Hill reporter Joseph Clark. Help us understand, please, some of the financial and political nuances of this measure. In fact, let's start with tariffs.
Yeah, great. Well, this was a measure passed by the Senate and then quickly by the House on Thursday that withdraws Russia's favored trade status, not only with the U.S., but this is a coordinated effort across G7 countries in a coordinated fashion, allow heavier tariffs on Russian goods. Specifically, this measure allows the president to enact heavier tariffs on Russian goods coming into the U.S. In terms of financial impact, the Congressional Research Service did a report on this as this was up in the House. And really, it's not that significant in some ways. Of course, the oil ban is separate. That is a significant impact. But U.S. Imports of other Russian goods are usually quite small. So it is very symbolic, and it could impact certain industries more than others. But in terms of a financial impact, it's not estimated to be that large. Though it does have a large symbolic effect.
So it seems like sanctions don't seem to deter Russian President Vladimir Putin. So what's the political and global impact of these measures anyway?
Well, I think this shows unity. Specifically, this measure shows unity in Congress on taking a tough stance to Russia. I think you could also argue that the economic sanctions could take more time to be, completely unpacked to really see the true impact. And I do think it does put pressure on the Kremlin, to a certain extent.
And this measure received 100% bipartisan support, despite some lawmakers being very critical of the Biden administration's doling out these sanctions. Talk about that.
Yeah, correct. So there is definitely bipartisan support behind sanctioning Russia and really holding Russia accountable in any way that is feasible. A similar bill that passed the Senate on Thursday actually passed the House with overwhelming support in mid-March. And as it proceeded to the Senate, there were hang-ups in terms of certain details about combining this measure, removing their trade status, with another measure that would codify the oil ban that was passed under executive order, or that was enacted under executive order. So there was some partisan bickering that took about a few weeks to smooth out, and that's kind of what we're seeing now. So it did pass overwhelmingly in the Senate, but it was not without partisan back and forth before they got to a final agreement.
Some have criticized the Biden administration in placing sanctions on Russia in a piecemeal fashion. What's behind that strategy?
Well, it could be. We see sanctions coming down at, I think, strategic times, right? So I think before the invasion happened, there was Republican pressure to apply tough sanctions as a deterrent measure. Most notably, that was through Nord Stream 2. Republicans wanted immediate sanctions levied on the pipeline. The administration argued the deterrent power of those sanctions is actually the threat, and then actually passing the sanctions after, they had crossed, we'll call it a red line, if you will. So that's kind of the strategy that they have taken, and we've seen throughout the conflict sanctions passed at escalatory times, if you will. So we saw a bevy of sanctions passed right after the invasion, and then we saw another round of sanctions passed on President Biden's trip overseas to Brussels and to Poland at the end of March. We saw another round of sanctions passed this week after the war crimes were exposed in Bucha. And so I think it's a strategic decision on the administration's part to roll out sanctions as needed to get the most deterrent effect possible from the sanctions. That's the way I think it could be read.
So according to political analysts and those who you've interviewed, what do these sanctions against Russia mean for the American people?
Well, I think it could mean different things. I think this particular trade tariffs bill, I think, will have maybe minimal impact on U.S. consumers, right, just because of the type of goods that it would actually target. I think the ban on Russian oil is likely going to have the most impact on the American consumer in terms of gas prices. Republicans, however, argue that a lot of those, the increase in gas prices occurred before these sanctions actually took place, though they still acknowledge that these sanctions do have an impact to a degree on the gas prices that we're seeing. So I think that is what's going to have the most impact on the U.S. consumer.
Joseph Clark, Capitol Hill reporter for The Washington Times. Find his article at washingtontimes.com. Thank you so much for helping us understand all the nuances of these sanctions and what they mean.
Thanks a lot for your time.
Washington Today continues in a moment.
Excited for the new season of Major League Baseball? Then you might also be excited for this episode of the weekly podcast from C-SPAN. We mark baseball's opening day in the most obvious way possible, by remembering the March 2005 House hearing into alleged steroid use by Major League players.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rafael Palmero, and I am a professional baseball player. I'll be brief in my remarks today. Let me start by telling you this. I have never used steroids, period. I do not know how to say it any more clearly than that. Never. The reference to me in Mr. Canseco's book is absolutely false. I am against the use of steroids. I don't think athletes should use steroids, and I don't think our kids should use them.
What a great opportunity to once again hear some of baseball's biggest stars deny steroid use and say they want to be role models for the kids. Today, none of them are in the Hall of Fame. Play ball! Play this podcast! C-SPAN's The Weekly. Find it and follow wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back to Washington Today. Here are a couple more headlines. A jury acquitted 2 men of all charges in a plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, but could not reach verdicts against 2 other alleged leaders of the plot. Daniel Harris and Brandon Caserta were found not guilty of conspiracy. The jury could not, however, reach verdicts for Adam Fox and Barry Croft Jr., which means the government can put them on trial again. A bipartisan group of senators want to start formally convening meetings to try to restart immigration reform efforts after the Senate returns to Washington from an April break. TheHill.com reporting that Senators Tom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, and Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, said that they want to bring together a group of senators interested in trying to revive immigration discussions. But the issues could be an uphill policy battle. Speaking on the Sarah Carter radio show, here's what Arizona Republican Representative Andy Biggs had to say.
You know, there's a different class, too, that's coming through right now, Sarah, down in Yuma. Here's what's happening. Some of these people, they're impatient. They want to be released into the U.S. immediately, right? They've got credit cards. So they say, well, we're going to release you into Yuma, and the NGO has no room for them. They'll go to a hotel, stay in the hotel. They'll be getting on a bus to be transported. They get Uber Eats delivered to them. They're paying with credit cards. This is not the caravan of 2019. These are people coming. They step across the river, and they've got new roller boards. They take off the traveling clothes, put on new clothes. They got a cell phone. They don't need to have a cell phone because the Biden administration said they're going to start giving everybody a cell phone.
Right.
They've got a cell phone, and they're FaceTiming the people back home. Hey, I made it, you know. And I will tell you, sir, you've been there so many times, and I've been there so many times. I have watched people walk up. They can't believe how easy it is to walk across our border. I've actually seen them walk up to the Border Patrol agents or sheriff's deputies and say, where's the border? Where's America? You're in America. You've been in America for 10 minutes. What? I'm in America? It was that easy? Of course it was that easy.
Representative Andy Biggs, Republican of Arizona. With more on immigration and the situation at the southern border, C-SPAN talked to Border Patrol agent and president of the National Border Patrol Council, Brandon Judd.
We represent 12,500 Border Patrol agents nationwide. That's on the northern borders, coastal borders, and of course on the southwest border. Our job is to represent the best interests of those agents. All of my elected officials, we are all agents ourselves. We put on a uniform and go out and patrol the border, but we also do this as well.
And as you do this, last week, the CDC announced that it's going to terminate Title 42 come May 23rd. What does that mean for you and your agents come May 23rd?
When we look at what's currently happening, how we're really concerned on the explosion that this is going to cause in illegal immigration. We're already dealing with a crisis that we've never dealt with before. When you look at the numbers of people that are crossing the border illegally, the number of people that we're taking into custody, we just don't have the resources to handle what we're currently dealing with. And once Title 42 goes away, it's expected to go up even more. Just to give you an idea, when the Border Patrol arrests 3,000 people crossing the border illegally on a daily basis, we barely have enough resources to manage that. Then it jumps up to 5,000 a day. And at that point, gaps are created in coverage. Cartels are able to exploit those gaps. At 8,000 a day, which is what we're currently at right now, we have stretches of border that are just completely wide open. Nobody's out there patrolling the border. And the dangerous, the reason why that's so dangerous is because then the organized crime, the cartels, can then run their higher value products, whether that's opioid, criminal aliens from special interest countries. They can then exploit those gaps. The cartels, they use illegal immigration in order to create these gaps in our coverage so that they can generate more profit. And again, when you look at those numbers, once Title 42 goes away, we're at 8,000 apprehensions right now. It's expected to go as high as 18,000. That, again, is just absolutely unsustainable. There just won't be any agents in the field at that point, and the border will be completely wide open.
So what does that mean? What are you asking Congress for? Do you want Title 42 to stay in place? If so, how long?
No, and when you look at Title 42, that's a public health order. I do believe that Title 42 should absolutely stay as long as there is a pandemic. There's a bill. I don't know if it was introduced yesterday or if it's going to be introduced today, but there are 5 Democrat co-sponsors. This bill is being introduced by James Lankford. It's called the Public Health and Border Security Act of 2002. You've got Sinema, Kelly, Manchin, Tester, and Hassan, all Democrats that are co-sponsoring this bill, that says that Title 42 cannot go away until the Surgeon General declares that the pandemic is over. And even once he declares the pandemic is over, then there's also 60 days to allow CBP to get together programs and policies that will help secure the border and not cause a huge influx of illegal border crossers. It's a very important act. I think that Congress is doing the right thing by asking for this. Until the pandemic is declared over in the United States, Title 42 should not go away.
You mentioned that this is a public health policy. The Commissioner of Customs and Border Patrol, Chris Magnus, a statement this week. I'm certain that you've seen it. This is what he said, agreeing with you. The CDC's Title 42 implemented at the height of the pandemic is not a border management authority. He said, throughout our agency's history, we have capably managed immigration at the border utilizing the authorities under Title 8 of the U.S. Code. These authorities allow non-citizens appropriate access to make asylum claims and include a range of enforcement options to hold individuals accountable for entering the U.S. illegally. This means most individuals who cross the border without legal authorization will be promptly placed in removal proceedings. So take me through the difference between an encounter using these Title 8 authorities that he's talking about and an encounter using the Title 42 authority.
Well, first and foremost, let me tell you that statement is very irresponsible. When he says that people are going to be placed in deportation proceedings, he's not lying, but he's not telling the American public what's going to happen when they're placed in deportation proceedings. When you use Title 8, if ICE does not have the space to hold people, then they have to be released into the United States. And right now, ICE doesn't even come close to having the space to hold the number of people that are crossing the border illegally. What he should have done, and if he would have been honest with the American public, he would have told them what happens when we process individuals under Title 8. But let's talk about the differences between Title 42 and the differences between Title 8. Under Title 42, under this public health rule that was declared by the Centers for Disease Control, it says that anybody that enters the United States, whether illegally or legally, are subject to immediate expulsion. That means that the Border Patrol or any other immigration official can take those individuals in custody and send them right back to Mexico or where they entered the United States from. They can immediately send them back. Under Title 8, you must process them and put them in deportation proceedings. When you process them and put them in deportation proceedings, that means they have a right to go before a judge and make a case on why they should not be deported. This is a legal right that they have, which we support 100%. The problem with that is if there's no space to hold individuals, or if the courts are too backed up, then these people are released into the United States pending a future court proceeding.
You can find the full interview with Border Patrol agent and president of the National Border Patrol Council, Brendan Judd, on cspan.org/Washington Journal. SpaceX launched 3 businessmen and their astronaut escort to the International Space Station for more than a week's stay. That's as NASA joined Russia in hosting guests for space travel. It's SpaceX's first private charter flight to the orbiting lab after 2 years of carrying astronauts there for NASA. Arriving at the space station Saturday will be an American, a Canadian, and an Israeli. They all run investment, real estate, and other companies. They're paying $55 million apiece for the rocket ride and accommodations, and of course, all meals are included. And if you missed any of this program, you can find it at cspan.org/podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you'd like more on the stories that are shaping Washington delivered daily right to your inbox, you can subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Nkoyo Iyamba. Thanks for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we're taking your calls, live, on the air, on the news of the day. And we'll discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Saturday morning, USA Today education reporter Chris Quintana discusses President Biden's announcement this week extending the federal student loan payment moratorium through August 31st. Then doctors Robert Pearl and Joel Zinberg talk about the Affordable Care Act and the future of health care. And in our Spotlight on Podcast segment, David Stewart, host of the Tax Notes Talk podcast, discusses his podcast and various tax topics ahead of the April 18th tax filing deadline. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Saturday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets.